Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. I think that probably represents most of us, depending on what time zone you're in. Happy to have you join us this morning. I know that people will continue to join us along the way, so we will. We'll get started with just kind of a welcome and let people join us. But we are thrilled to have you here today and just want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is meant to be kind of an intimate little group so we can have some conversations. So, really thrilled that you're joining us. For those of you that I don't know, I'm Carrie Hodgett. I'm your Director of Community Development here at Tourism Cares, and welcome to our first member exchange of the year. These exchanges were created in response to your feedback. One of the things that we hear consistently from our members is that some of the most valuable learning doesn't come from a presentation or a report, it comes from each other. So the idea here is for us to be able to talk amongst ourselves. It comes from hearing what's working, what's not, what challenges organizations are facing, and how others are navigating them. So that's exactly why these sessions exist. They're also supposed to be little bite-sized conversations that you can revisit later when maybe you might need them in that specific moment. So, and these are intentionally set up as meetings rather than webinars because we really want the conversation to go both ways. We want our members in the spotlight, and we want to hear your perspectives, your successes, and the challenges you're working through as our industry continues its sustainability journey. And so today, we're excited to feature one of our members and a longtime friend of Tourism Cares, Tartan Bond. Tartan Bond is a strategic communications agency specializing in public relations, crisis communications, social media, and digital marketing. Their team helps organizations build trust, protect reputation, and connect authentically with audiences at both the national and local level. Our conversation here today is one that feels increasingly relevant across every corner of the travel industry: crisis communications. Tourism is evolving quickly and not always under ideal circumstances. From climate events to political uncertainty to over-tourism, community concerns, and other disruptions, organizations are increasingly being asked to communicate in real time while situations are still unfolding. Destinations are managing recovery and reputation. Suppliers are navigating operational disruptions alongside rising traveler expectations. Buyers and advisors are responding to shifting demand and traveler concerns, often without clear playbooks on how to communicate through rapidly changing circumstances. So today we'll explore how organizations can communicate responsibly and transparently during moments of disruption, how to balance business realities with sensitivity to impacted communities, and how to build trust with travelers, partners, media, stakeholders when uncertainty is high. So a few notes before we jump in. As always, we hope today's conversation is candid, practical, and interactive. We encourage you to share your own experiences, ask questions, and contribute to the discussions. The goal isn't to leave with all the answers, but to learn from one another and leave with a few new ideas, perspectives, and approaches to consider. We'll share the recording only on the Members Resource Hub and just the part that kind of the little TED Talk that Deirdre is doing. So you can revisit it later, but know that our member community really is a safe space. And please make sure to help reduce distraction by turning off your camera and going on mute while Deirdre takes the virtual stage. Please use the chat to introduce yourselves, which you can do now, pose questions as they come to you along the way, and share your reactions. And once our opening presentation concludes, we encourage you all to jump in, turn your cameras on, discuss what we just heard. It's really an opportunity to ask questions amongst this small group, share your personal experiences, or just react. This time is yours. And just a few reminders of our upcoming member exclusive opportunities. Our new member orientation is in July, July 9th. While it's designed for new members, it's not exclusive to them. So if you or your team needs a refresher or somebody is new on your team, please feel free to join us. We'll have a QR code at the end. Our next member town hall is on August 19th, where we'll share updates on our latest programs, impact, and what's ahead, while also shining a spotlight on fellow members who will share their own insights and experiences. And finally, while not limited to members, it is very limited in size, so we want you to know about it. We have our global summit happening in October in Peru. There are still a few seats left, so if you're interested, we encourage you to apply. And now it is my pleasure to hand this show over to Deirdre. She is the president and co-owner of Tartan Bond Communications. Deirdre is a veteran of tourism communications and a reputation strategist with 25 plus years as an entrepreneur, guiding destinations and brands through complex issues and crises. She leads integrated reputation management, stakeholder and media relations, and crisis preparedness and response for tourism, Indigenous, and sustainability-focused clients across Canada and globally. A co-founder of the Impact Sustainability Travel and Tourism Summit, she is recognized for Crisis, Risk and Resilience Council in Global Sustainable Tourism. So take it away, Deirdre.
Great, thank you. And thank you for that lead up. I love the fact that you talked about this being a conversation because I know I'm going to learn as much about from everyone that's attending today, and hopefully some of the experience that we've had over the years is going to help as well. And poor Carrie has to keep up with me because I did do a script, but I'm known to go off of it. So I'll probably just you'll hear me say, just go to the next slide. But I think the biggest thing for me to just kick off today was I was at a conference last week with this, it was called the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, all the mayors and councillors from across Canada. And there was a session on crisis communications and emergency response, more importantly. And something that was said really rang true for me in that we continue to say that these are once in 100 year experiences, this once in 100 year disasters. It even happened last night on the coast of Vancouver Island in Victoria. They were saying that we're once in 50 years, we're going to have the highest tides and we have 80-mile-per-hour winds and we're expecting flooding. But the reality is these aren't once in 100 years anymore. These are happening year over year. And just because something happened last year doesn't mean it's not going to happen again. And it's really shifting the way tourism operators and destinations, particularly, and municipalities for their residents, are having to think about their business continuity and their business plans. So that's the frame that I actually set this discussion up. So, Kara, if you want to go to the next slide for me. As promised, I'm totally off script for what I originally wrote. Just to give you a little bit of background of where we came from. So as I mentioned, 25 years, one of our mentors is someone who, though you are all probably far too young to remember, a gentleman named Kevin Roberts, but he wrote this sort of groundbreaking book about branding called Love Marks, and he was actually going to call it Trust Marks. But he felt that people have a connection with experiences and brands that come deep from the heart. And it is from authenticity, transparency, and creating that important trusted relationship. And that's what got us on this path about reputation management when we worked in tourism. Destination Canada is our client, Jordan is our client, and we work with a lot of hotels and different adventure travel operators. We understood clearly that the reason why people continue to go back to destinations or go back to that experience provider is that trust and that emotional connection that they have. That really started to ring true a couple of years ago when we looked at sustainability and regeneration in travel and how people responded to the misinformation, the political instability, the things that we were seeing that was happening in the environment, really helped brands, whether they grew or whether they didn't. And we certainly saw that with the advent of social media moving forward. So with over-tourism, resident pressure, climate events, as I said, political uncertainty, and especially misinformation, it's really shifting travelers' expectations on where they make their choices of where they're going to travel to. And years ago, we work quite heavily in the in Western Canada around supporting communications around wildfire preparation and how to communicate to visitors. And I'll never forget one of the ambassadors for the UK. We were talking, came to us and said, "Why should I promote Canada?" Unless I know for sure that you're prepared to take care of our visitors, just as you're prepared to take care of your residents. So that was a really important lesson for us as we started looking in what is crisis communications and crisis preparedness and emergency response. So if you flip over to the next slide for me, Carrie. So as I mentioned, this is the world that we're in right now. And so for tourism organizations, our new normal means treating wildfires, smoke, floods, heat, um, human-caused issues as reoccurring business conditions versus a crisis is going to happen once in 100 years. It means that we have to have standing plans for visitor communications, community first messaging, again, tied back to that focus that we have at Tourism Cares and others about how we balance that resident visitor interface. Make sure that your community is part of this messaging as well. Business continuity and rapid recovery storytelling. I think there was a study that was done a few years ago. The University of Florida leans heavily into in tourism crisis response. And they said that if you're prepared ahead of time, it can lessen your recovery to when before the crisis happened by 50%. If you're unprepared, it actually extends your recovery, your ability to recover and build that trust back as a destination. And I think we're seeing that today when we look at some of the places that have been hit hard in the years more recently. So it really requires us embedding climate risk and resilience thinking into destination strategy, brand, and product development. I'll give you another example that I had recently. I was at a conference in Eastern Canada, and at that conference, they were laying out their business strategy for tourism, and it was really focused on winter sports, how they were going to really lean into all the activities that you can do when it's cold and there's snow and skiing. Yet their Ministry of Environment was actually predicting that their winters were going to be shorter and shorter and warmer and warmer. So there was a huge disconnect on what was being promoted at one end from the destination development than what was being promoted by the climate scientists in that region, environmental scientists, and what was happening with their climate. And that disconnect is going to only show up when people book a ski vacation, as they did here on Vancouver Island this year, and are normally a huge snowpack for a ski hill actually couldn't open or rarely open for only a few days. So again, it's understanding what are we doing for climate resilience and mitigation? And those are questions that I think investors are also asking when they're looking to invest in destination development as well, another area that we work heavily in with Destination Canada. So the importance of doing this preparation ahead of time is so that when your disruption comes, your business or your community is not starting from zero, but working from a position of preparedness and shared understanding. So more and more, as we talk about sustainability and regeneration, we're including the full community in those conversations, not working in a silo as a tourism destination or a tourism operator. I'm still shocked how many people, and I'd love to hear from you, still, when I talk to some municipalities about when they're leaning into emergency response, that they don't take visitors into consideration, that they're still only focused on residents, not understanding that at any given time, they will have a certain amount of visitors in their communities that may not have access to those Facebook chats or the online alert systems that they actually are in that, and they may be turned away, which happened here in Western Canada in the early days of wildfires, where people were being turned out of hotels so that the firefighters could have access to their rooms, but then had nowhere to go. So again, that preparedness is so critical. And that's why we say trust is building that trust before you need it is really that first line of resilience. So I really do see that crisis readiness is a sustainability capability. And if organizations cannot communicate, coordinate, and protect relationships during disruption, they cannot deliver meaningful travel consistently. Finally, one thing that we also talk about in this, and you can actually go to the next slide for me, is when we talk about the three areas to start. I shouldn't say finally, because it's actually feels like just the beginning. As referenced, I think those relationships building ahead of time across your networks is critical. You want to build your community before you need them. We always say that to a lot of our clients. So talk to your municipal leaders, talk to your emergency responders. Let them know how you operate, how you would support them. In a case where we had a situation in a very remote area of BC, the tourism providers actually knew the access routes far better than some of the politicians that were trying to work on the emergency response side of things. And yet they weren't talking to each other. So while there was the communications was that there was no access to this region, there was actually quite a lot of access routes that some people weren't aware of. So that connection, that information sharing ahead of time can actually improve how quickly you can respond and how quickly you can recover as well. So Indigenous partners, critical. They often have, again, we saw in years past that they were often forgotten in the communications in their remote communities. So it's really important to keep them in mind and get to know your media as well. Understand we always talk about it being that one source of truth when a situation is happening. Under certain situations, we all know there's different authorities that are put in response, whether it's happening on the ocean, whether it's happening in the mountains, it's happening in the forests, happening in a city, in their city. There's different authorities. Who are those authorities? That tends to be your one source of truth that you can point to, who's actually creating the communications that you want that needs to be consistent. But if you don't know that during a crisis instance, it's really hard to scramble and try and find it, especially as we discovered in one cybersecurity incident, you don't have access to internet. So again, we're going to talk a little bit. That's where that risk management comes in. Take the time to go around your team. We always say to our clients, this is going to make you sleep better, we promise. Sit around your table with your operators, your leadership team, or your operators, or your region, even better. We did this up in the Caribou Chilcotin. We brought in everyone around a table and we said, what's keeping you awake at night? What sort of situations are you worried that we're not prepared for? And let's think them through. Let's create a risk register and let's see how we would mitigate this risk and how would we respond to it? And who needs to be part of this communications? And who would that one single source of truth be? Who would be that authority that we would lean on so that we can help communicate it? In our role with Destination Canada, the biggest issue we face is when something's happening in Canada, it's such a big country, is often people will talk about a situation that's happening and hitting the whole region for it. So telling people to stay away from a region. We saw this with the Rockies with Jasper recently. People were told not to go to the Canadian Rockies. Well, those of you that have been to the Rockies, you know how many thousands of kilometers in between. Banff was still operating. Kananaskis was still operating. Jasper was affected. Yet in Germany and in some of our international markets, the message was do not go to the Canadian Rockies. They're on fire. So part of our job has been to be aware and then correct that misinformation. And that is now part of our risk register. When we move forward, is that we have to monitor a situation with smoke, with fire, with flooding. How would we be prepared and how would we respond? It's so important. And then talking about responding. So disciplined communications will turn a very complex situation into timely, credible action that supports recovery and reinforces the fact that you were prepared and part of your sustainability, resilience, and regeneration plans. So it's not about moving fast, it's about moving with intention and clarity. And by being prepared, that enables you to do that. Is you don't want to be reckless. People will ask you to speculate. What is happening? Why is it happening? What are you doing about it? We'll see us reference holding statements. These can be pre-prepared in your response. They're simply statements that you know that you're going to be asked about a certain situation that's happening. And it's a statement that lets people know that you are aware of it, that you're working with authorities, and that you'll get the back to them as soon as you have an update. And then you can actually point them to that one source of truth if it's appropriate. In again, thinking back to wildfires, we always pointed to the emergency responders and the government websites to get the most up-to-date information. But we still spoke as a tourism destination because people would come to us, especially visitors, looking for us to be able to provide answers. If we don't have those answers, or if we're not responding, or they're going to a website that hasn't been updated and just shows information. I remember WestJet having a situation in the Caribbean, and rather than they were still promoting trips on their Facebook page, even though there was a hurricane situation happening and people were having trouble getting out. It was all over the news. You want to make sure that disconnect is not happening because that's when you lose that really important trust. So it's being prepared and match the messaging to, this is again why it's good to be prepared, is match the messaging to the audience. So your community is going to want to hear that you're there to support and you're there and that you're there to help. Residents are going to want to hear, those are residents, travelers are going to want to know, here's where you can go. Here's what you need to know before you go. Here's how we're going to support you as an operator destination. Media will also be forcing, if they can't get the information they need from the authorities, they tend to go and follow up with anybody they can find on the ground. You need to be prepared to continue to point them back to the authorities. You'll be asked to speculate. You'll be asked we saw that a little bit recently with the expedition ship that was caught with the virus. They were trying to get everybody they could to comment on it. And you really want to point them to the experts who are going to comment by reinforcing that you're there supporting. And here's what we're doing for our visitors, and here's what we're doing for our teams. And that's our priority. The other, in your response, by being prepared, you also want to make sure, and I've seen this happen time and again, where you are asked to focus on your business or your destination's tourism structures versus what's actually happening in the community in which you operate. You always want to put the community first. That's that trusted relationship that you've spent so many years building. As soon as you make it about yourself and the fact that you need to get back into business or you're losing money or this is affecting you, you do tend to lose that trust because actually the more that you have a healthy, thriving community, the more you're going to benefit and you're as a destination and or an operator. And we can talk about that a little bit more as well. So again, as I mentioned in the response before we move on, the core challenge is not just speed, it's about responding without becoming careless and defensive and being or seen disconnected. You often hear someone saying, "Oh, that was really tone deaf what they said," or it seemed inauthentic. You want to make sure that you're prepared enough that you can be authentic and transparent in how you respond to a situation. And a useful way to think about it is crisis communications is really about trust under pressure. That you're being consistent with your values, you're continuing to represent your company or your destination the best possible way while supporting the situation at hand and the people that have the authority to do so and respond the most effectively. So that's really, really important. Moving along to the next slide. So again, I love this phrase that in a crisis, your contact list becomes your emergency infrastructure. Spend the time now really getting to know who those important stakeholders are within your field of operation or destination and connect. Right now, we're in a situation here, I'm telling Tales Out of School a little bit, where it became apparent that we have 13 different municipalities. Each one has emergency response. Well, they do talk to each other for residents. They actually don't have any sensitivity around visitors. And we have an airport and a ferry system who also don't know who would be the point of contact if a situation like an earthquake or a tsunami or a region-wide situation happened. Communicators do not know who they should be focused on or talking to. We're trying to correct that by bringing them all together now and understanding where are the gaps and where are the opportunities. Not during a crisis. We don't want to find out what went wrong, what's wrong with something when we're in the middle of trying to respond to an emergency. We want to actually find those gaps and those holes now. So that's really, really important. Um, so that's why it's so important to take the time to identify who those important and trusted partners are, including media and trade. And that again, media are the ones that you are those trusted sources. We do know that there's citizen journalism out there that's actively posting. Again, that's where you want to monitor, monitor, monitor. When a situation is happening, it's really important to see what information is being out there and correcting that misinformation if you can. We had, again, a situation here where there was a Cryptococcus is a kind of a fungus or something that was happening. It's known in more tropical parts of the world. We actually had it in an area of our rainforest when you drive between Victoria up to Tofino, and some dogs were getting sick, and it was showing up in animals and pets and people that had compromised immune systems. However, the chances of getting Cryptococcus was very rare, but the news media picked up on it, and people were afraid to drive through the what a area that was an old growth forest where it was known to be found to get to Tofino. And all of a sudden we were getting cancellations and from our hotels. And we're like, what's going on? And we found out that in certain parts of our international markets, they were being told that it was a dangerous place to go because of this situation. So we got our chief medical officer to go on the air in Germany to talk about it. He was a credible source of truth to talk about how safe it was, that this was that they were monitoring it, and that it wasn't something that you were going to get, whether you were walking in the forest or driving, unless you had a compromised immune system, which most people who were traveling weren't. So it's just, again, understanding what is being said out. That monitoring is really, really important as part of your communication structures. Having those systems in place, having a team in place that you can actually task to monitor is really important, so they can do it the moment that a situation arises, or they can identify crisis happening around the world and bring it back and say, hey, let's just do a tabletop situation and figure out how we would respond if something like that were to happen to us. And those are best practices. I realize I'm running a little bit short of my TED talk. So just going over to the next, two more slides, three more slides. Again, you'll get this as well, but these are just some of the things that planning questions. When I talk about a tabletop exercise, I'd love to hear if you guys do them. If you don't, happy to walk you through what it is. It's just bringing your team together or your community together and asking these types of questions. And then what are some of the actions that you can take now, which is, again, that build out those risk registers. Think about some of the scenarios and how you would respond. Smoke is one of those ones that's really, people don't think it's as bad because it doesn't mean there's a fire, but we have smoke. But it does mean that people might not be able to go on that hike or do that mountain bike or want to be outside because it's hard and the respiratory. What are the opportunities that then people can do that you can promote should there be a situation where there's smoke, where it comes in and out of a destination? Making sure that you have identified someone within your organization who can speak if you need to have a voice, or who is that person that's going to speak to the situation at hand. As I mentioned, monitoring, and then recovery communications tied back to your commitments. So again, don't that balance between business continuity, but keeping true to your values about sustainability, of which a large part is supporting the community in which you operate, has got to be critical. We see that a lot in Jasper. There was a lot of people that wanted to come out to Jasper too soon because they wanted to support. Oh, is it open for business? I want to come. I want to spend money in Jasper. They weren't ready. They were still too traumatized. So again, tourism Jasper was telling people, please, we know you want to come. We know you want to support. We're not ready. Please wait. We'll let you know when we are. And it was just really important for them to put the community first before they decided they wanted to fill the hotel rooms and get people up and running again. So just being conscious of that. The next two slides are just really about checks and balances and what not to do. We certainly talked about the governance of again, what is your structure? Do you have an emergency response team? Does your destination have an emergency response team? If they do, what is your role as an operator within that? How can you support? Do that risk assessment, as I mentioned, and prepare those plans if you can. And I'm happy to share templates if you want to know what an issue we do, what's called an issues brief, where we're following certain situations and we start to collect information so that we're not starting from scratch. If an issue bubbles up to being a crisis, a situation we know that there's a fire happening in a region that it might affect our destination because of smoke. We start planning for it now and get ahead of it. And then when it talks to you about the next slide about again reiterating, making sure you know who the emergency responders are, your community leaders, your influencers, ensuring that you're engaged with them as well. Map out all the stakeholders that you need to that you want to be in contact with. Make sure you have their names and their contact information. Make sure if there's someone within your team that is leading this, who's their backup? People go on vacation. Who's there to step in if you're not available? Make sure you have everybody's Google or email address that isn't tied to Outlook or something that you can use if you don't have access to. What happens if the computers are down? We see that in cyber. We've had some cybersecurity incidences, ransomware, and we've had where their whole email system was shut down. So they couldn't communicate like they had to go through texting and things like that. What are some of those alternative ways of communicating with your team? And having those in place ahead of time. And I mentioned that those holding statements and having your language, the language that reiterates your values as both a destination and as an operation, and it's really, really important because emotions are high and it's really easy to sort of have a knee-jerk reaction or get pressured into saying something that's not reflective of who you are as a company or as a destination. So I guess to just wrap up my section and open up to questions that if the future's, we know that the future travel is going to be volatile. Communications has to be much more disciplined, is what I'm finding. More human. Don't be afraid of emotions, and more values led, where we really are doing this for the right reasons. We're doing this to be prepared so that we can respond in a way that takes care of not only our guests, but also the communities and team members that help us create these experiences. And it's really part of who we are as sustainable business operators and destinations so that we can protect what's important to us when conditions are often the hardest. So I think I'll leave it to that and open it up to questions. I hope I kind of ran through this. There's so much to talk about, but I'd love to hear more from you and have discussions and learn from you as well from your own experiences.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Deirdre. I know that I know from my perspective, I mean, as you were talking about wildfires, I know that at least four of us on this call here live in Colorado. So my mind was certainly turning, but I'm sure everybody else was kind of thinking about the crises in their own homes, but all home areas, but also where they go, where they take visitors. So. As we said earlier, we do want this to be a conversation. So definitely want to be able to hear from you all who have joined this conversation as well. So if you all have, we have a couple of questions on the screen here from what Deirdre has given us to think about. But so a couple of the questions here, and I love Deirdre how you really brought a tourism and crisis response are not separate, and tourism really can add a lot of value. Um, just the knowledge base of the areas, those kind of things. I loved how you brought that in. So I would love to hear some thoughts from anybody on the call as well. And I think we'll stop recording at this point, so you know that everything we talk about here will stay here because we want to be really honest about it. So any thoughts from people on